The neighbors heard Marcus screaming at his pregnant wife through the downpour, calling her worthless trash, telling her she'd never amount to anything. They watched her collapse in the mud outside their Detroit duplex, begging him to reconsider. Then they heard it, that engine purr, deep and foreign, like something that didn't belong on Gratiot Avenue. When that black Maybach pulled up and the man in the custom suit stepped out, Marcus's face went ghost white. But it wasn't just the car or the suit that made his blood run cold. It was the symbol on the man's ring, catching streetlight as he stepped forward. A pyramid with an eye. Marcus had just humiliated the niece of Vincent Castellano, a man whose organization didn't just own half of Detroit. They owned the people who thought they owned Detroit. The storm hammered Detroit's east side that October night, like the sky was splitting open. Inside the cramped duplex on Gratiot Avenue, Sarah stood frozen by the stove, staring at the blackened pot roast she'd forgotten while her head pounded with another migraine. 7 months pregnant, her belly pressed against the chipped countertop. The smell of burnt meat mixed with something chemical seeping through the walls from the meth house next door. She just knew Marcus would blame her for this. Marcus slouched at their scratched kitchen table, still in his gas station uniform reeking of cigarettes and cheap cologne. 4 empty Miller Lite cans sat next to his phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. His red-rimmed eyes followed her every move like a predator watching prey. He'd been coming home drunk earlier each week since she'd noticed the weird calls he'd ignore when she walked in the room. "One simple thing," Marcus said, his voice like gravel scraping concrete. "Cook dinner. That's literally all you had to do today, Sarah." She opened her mouth to explain about the dizziness that made her sit down for 20 minutes, how the clinic doctor said her iron was dangerously low. But Marcus's fist slammed the table so hard the cans jumped and clattered. The sharp metallic sound made her flinch, her hand flying to shield her stomach. "The baby! The baby! The baby!" Marcus shot up, his chair screeching against linoleum that curled at the edges. "What about me? What about the fact I work 10-hour shifts while you're here doing absolutely nothing?" Sarah wanted to remind him about the 2 gas station jobs she'd worked until 6 weeks ago, standing shifts while her back screamed and her feet swelled like balloons, hiding every dollar in a shoebox for when the baby came. But she'd learned silence tasted safer than argument when whiskey made his eyes go flat like that. What happened next moved faster than Sarah's brain could process. Marcus stormed to their bedroom and returned with armfuls of her clothes. He hurled them through the front door into the downpour. Her shoes, her toothbrush, the Ziploc bag with ultrasound photos where you could barely see the baby's profile. Everything landed in oily puddles on the cracked sidewalk while lights started clicking on across the street, curtains moving. "Please," Sarah grabbed his forearm, her voice cracking. "Think about the baby. Just tonight. I'll leave tomorrow morning, I promise, please." Marcus shoved her hand away so violently she stumbled backward, her shoulder hitting the doorframe. The old wood splintered under her weight, a sliver jabbing into her skin. "You're nothing!" Marcus's spit sprayed her face when he screamed. "You hear me? Nothing. You were nothing in that group home. You're nothing now. You'll die nothing. You came from nothing. You are nothing. And there's nothing out there for you." Across Gratiot, Mrs. Barriott. Chen stepped onto her porch despite the rain, her voice cutting through. "Sarah, honey, come here." But Sarah's legs wouldn't work. She walked into that storm like someone already dead inside, dropped to her knees in the cold mud mixed with motor oil from the street, and let the rain soak through her threadbare maternity dress while gathering her ruined things with shaking hands. Behind her, Marcus slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The baby kicked against her ribs, hard, urgent, like asking what was wrong, why everything felt so broken. What Marcus didn't know, what Sarah had kept buried for 5 years, was that she'd been lying about being completely alone in this world. 5 years ago, before she'd even met Marcus at that Coney Island, Sarah had been working the dinner shift at the Detroit Athletic Club downtown. She'd dropped a butter knife while clearing plates at a private dinner in the river room. When she bent to grab it from the marble floor, the older man at the head of the table locked eyes with her like he'd seen a ghost materialize. "Stop," he'd said, his voice cutting through conversation. Everyone at the table went silent. He stood up so fast his chair tipped. "What's your name?" "Sarah Mitchell, sir," she'd stammered, terrified she'd done something fireable. "I'm so sorry about the knife." The man's hand went to his chest, his breathing suddenly wrong. "Your mother. Tell me your mother's name." Sarah had frozen like ice. "I never knew my mother. They told me she died giving birth. I grew up in state care." The man's eyes filled with something between tears and shock. "What year were you born? What month?" "March 1999. "Why?" "Come with me," he'd said, and the way he said it, like an order from someone used to being obeyed, made her follow him to a private office off the main hall. That night changed everything she thought she knew about reality. Vincent Castellano had shown her pictures on his phone of a woman who looked exactly like Sarah. Same copper hair, same gray-green eyes, same small scar above the left eyebrow. He'd told her about a mother named Catherine Castellano who'd loved ancient architecture, who'd studied symbols and sacred geometry, who'd died in childbirth after hiding her pregnancy from the family. He told her about money, $40 million in a trust fund her mother had established. But then he'd said something that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Your mother was part of something, Sarah. Something most people don't believe exists. Our family belongs to an organization that's guided world events for centuries. We call ourselves the Enlightened. Others call us other names." He'd shown her his ring then, gold, heavy, with a symbol that made her stomach turn. A pyramid with an all-seeing eye at the apex, surrounded by Latin words she couldn't read. "Novus Ordo Seclorum," Vincent had whispered. "A new order of the ages. Your mother was being groomed to take a seat at the table. Now that birthright passes to you." Sarah had been 22 and absolutely terrified. The word family scared her. The word organization that controlled things scared her more. Secret societies, symbols, people who claimed to guide nations. It sounded insane. It sounded dangerous. So she'd run. Changed her number, moved to a different neighborhood, and 4 weeks later met Marcus at a Coney Island on Michigan Avenue. Simple Marcus, who pumped gas and drove a 15-year-old Civic. Safe Marcus, who seemed normal compared to uncles with mysterious rings who talked about controlling the world. Now kneeling in the oily mud outside Marcus's duplex, Sarah's cracked phone screen lit up in her soaped pocket. "Unknown number." The text made her heart stop. "The family sees all. We're outside. It's time." Before she could process those words, she heard it. That engine sound, deep, smooth, expensive, purring like a predator. Bright LED headlights cut through the rain sheets, white and piercing and impossible for this neighborhood. A midnight black Maybach S-Class, $500,000 easy, pulled up to the curb, and the entire street went dead silent like someone had killed the sound. Mrs. Chin stood frozen on her porch, both hands covering her mouth. Mr. Jackson came outside despite the downpour, just staring with his mouth open. The kids who'd been sitting in a beat-up Impala down the street scrambled out with their phones already recording because they knew. They just knew. They were watching something that would break the internet. The Maybach's rear door opened and Vincent Castellano stepped out into the rain. Tall, maybe 6'3", mid-50s with perfectly silver hair. He wore a suit that looked custom-made charcoal gray that probably cost $15,000. But it was his right hand that made Sarah's breath catch. That ring, that pyramid and eye symbol, catching the streetlight as he moved. His driver rushed over with an umbrella, but Vincent wasn't looking at his expensive shoes hitting wet pavement. He was looking straight at Sarah, kneeling in that mud, and his expression was breaking with every step. "Niece," Vincent said, his voice carrying across the yard with a weight that made the air feel heavier. "I've been watching for 5 years, waiting, protecting from the shadows. But tonight you called out, whether you knew it or not, and the family answers." Inside the duplex, Marcus must have been watching through the grimy window, because suddenly the door flew open. He stepped onto the porch, confusion twisting fast into panic. "What the hell? Who are you?" But Vincent didn't even glance at him. He walked straight through the rain, letting his $1,000 shoes sink into the mud, letting his perfect suit get destroyed, and knelt beside Sarah like she was the only thing in the universe that mattered. "I'm sorry," Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have intervened sooner, but the council wanted to see if you'd find your way back naturally, if you'd recognize what you are." Sarah whispered, "Uncle Vincent." Saying it made it real, made all of it real. The symbols, the organization, the power he'd talked about. Marcus's voice cracked when he yelled, "Uncle? Sarah, what is he talking about? You said you were alone." "You said you had nobody." That's when Vincent finally turned to look at Marcus. The temperature seemed to drop 15 degrees. Vincent's voice came out quiet, terrifyingly quiet, but heavy enough to make Marcus take 3 steps back. "What did you just say to my niece? To a daughter of the Castellano bloodline?" Behind Vincent, a second vehicle had pulled up, a black Suburban with windows tinted beyond legal limits. 3 men in dark suits stepped out, and not one of them looked like regular security. They looked military. They looked like problems got solved when they showed up. One of them had a small tattoo visible on his neck, that same pyramid symbol. Mrs. Chen found her voice, loud and shaking. "Sweet Jesus! That's Vincent Castellano. My nephew works at GM. He said this man doesn't just own buildings. He said people disappear when they cross him. He said there's symbols all over his offices that mean things." The color drained from Marcus's face in seconds, going from angry red to ash gray as reality crashed into him like a sledgehammer. "Mr. Castellano, look, this is a misunderstanding," Marcus stammered, his tough guy voice crumbling. "Sarah and we had a fight, yeah, but couples fight, and I didn't know she was connected to you, I swear." Vincent cut him off with that same bone-chilling calm. "She told you she was alone. She told you she had no one. And you believe that gave you permission to treat her like she was disposable, like she was nothing." That word, nothing, hung in the Detroit air like an accusation written in blood. Marcus had screamed it at Sarah 3 minutes ago, and now it was being quoted back by a man whose organization probably had files on Marcus going back years. Vincent helped Sarah up as carefully as if she were made of glass while one of his men brought over what looked like a designer blanket cashmere, probably worth more than Marcus's monthly rent. They wrapped it around Sarah's trembling shoulders. "I'm sorry I ran," Sarah said through her tears. 5 years ago, I was scared." "I didn't understand what you were telling me." Vincent's expression softened just slightly. "Fear is natural when you first learn the truth. But blood calls to blood, Sarah. And tonight, when you needed us most, the family felt it. We always feel it." He looked back at Marcus, and something in his eyes made Marcus's bladder almost let go. "Do you have any of my niece's belongings that aren't currently ruined in the street?" Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "This is my house. She can't just—" One of Vincent's men stepped forward, the one with the neck tattoo. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Sir, we can retrieve Miss Mitchell's belongings now, or we can return with associates who specialize in more." Persuasive negotiations. Your choice. You have 30 seconds. Marcus looked at the men, at the vehicles, at the neighbors now filling porches and sidewalks, at his phone absolutely exploding with notifications because half the block was live streaming this moment that would haunt him forever. Someone had already posted it to WorldStar with the caption, "Detroit man learns his baby mama's family is Illuminati." "Fine," Marcus choked out. "Take whatever, just." As Vincent guided Sarah toward the Maybach, she looked back once at the duplex where she'd spent 5 years feeling like a prisoner in her own skin. Marcus stood on the porch looking small and powerless and terrified, exactly how he'd made her feel every single day. The Maybach's interior was warm and quiet, smelling like leather and something else, incense maybe, or sage. The rain was just gentle white noise against bulletproof glass. Vincent sat beside her, holding her hand, not saying anything for a long moment. Just being there the way family, real family, should be. "How did you find me tonight?" Sarah finally asked. "I never called you. I don't even have your number anymore." Vincent's answer revealed a truth that made her skin prickle. "The family doesn't need phone calls, Sarah. We have." Other ways of knowing. 8 months ago, one of our analysts flagged your name on a marriage license, Sarah Mitchell, married to Marcus Thompson. I wanted to reach out immediately, but the Council of 12 decided to observe, to see if you were safe, if you were happy, if your choice to live outside the organization was genuine. He pulled out his phone and showed her something that made her stomach drop: surveillance photos. Her and Marcus at the grocery store, her at the clinic, her sitting alone on the porch. Dozens of photos over months. "The house 3 doors down," Vincent said quietly. "We've owned it for 7 months. The family watches over its own, Sarah, whether they accept their birthright or not. We saw enough to know you weren't safe. We saw enough to know it was time to bring you home. Through the rain-streaked window, Sarah watched her old life shrink away. The duplex, the broken street, Marcus still standing on that porch looking lost and small. She'd thought she was nothing. But it turned out she'd been part of something most people couldn't even imagine. She'd been running from the truth her whole life. The estate in Bloomfield Hills looked like something from a different world entirely. Not just wealth. This was old power. 6-acre property surrounded by stone walls, the mansion itself a masterpiece of French Renaissance architecture. 5 stories of limestone and copper lit up against the night sky like a cathedral. But what made Sarah's breath catch were the symbols. Carved into the stone above the entrance, that pyramid with the eye. Worked into the iron gates, geometric patterns that looked ancient. On the fountain in the circular drive, Latin phrases she still couldn't read. Inside was even more overwhelming. Marble floors with inlaid symbols that seemed to follow sacred geometry. Artwork that didn't just look expensive. It looked historically significant, like it belonged in museums but was here instead. A double staircase curving up to the second floor, and on the wall between them, a massive painting of men in robes surrounding a pyramid altar, hands raised. "Is that real?" Sarah whispered. "Did that actually happen?" Vincent smiled slightly. Some truths are hidden in plain sight, disguised as art or mythology. Yes, Sarah, our organization has existed for centuries. We don't control everything. That's conspiracy theory nonsense, but we do influence. We do guide. We do protect certain knowledge that humanity isn't ready for. Family photos covered a long hallway, but mixed among them were other images. Her mother in academic robes standing next to symbols Sarah recognized from history books. Her mother shaking hands with people Sarah recognized from news footage, senators, CEOs, people who supposedly ran the world. "Your mother was brilliant," Vincent said softly. She was being prepared to join the inner circle, the Council of 12, if she'd lived. Tumble. He trailed off. "You have her gift, Sarah, the ability to see patterns others miss, to understand symbols and their power. It's in your blood." The guest suite was enormous bedroom, sitting room, bathroom bigger than her entire old apartment. But what caught Sarah's eye was the bookshelf, leather-bound volumes with titles in Latin, Greek, languages she didn't recognize. One book lay open on a reading table, pages filled with symbols, diagrams of pyramids and circles, and mathematical formulas. Dr. Tummer. Rachel Goldman arrived within the hour, a sharp woman in her 40s who examined Sarah with careful efficiency while Vincent waited in the marble hallway. "Blood pressure elevated but manageable," Dr. Goldman said, making notes on a tablet. "The baby's heartbeat is strong. But I'm concerned about stress levels, Sarah. This kind of emotional trauma isn't good for either of you." She looked at Sarah with kind but serious eyes. "Tonight wasn't the first time your husband hurt you, was it?" Sarah's throat tightened. "He never hit me." Dr. Goldman's expression showed perfect understanding. Physical violence isn't the only kind that destroys people. Psychological abuse can be just as devastating. What came next was harder to hear than Sarah expected. While she'd been with the doctor, Vincent's team had been at Marcus's duplex, and they'd found things that made her want to vomit. Credit cards in her name she'd never applied for. Bank statements showing cash withdrawals she'd never made. Accounts systematically drained over 18 months. "Marcus has been stealing from you," Vincent explained gently, sitting across from her in the study. "Approximately $38,000. The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. $38,000. Every penny she'd saved from her gas station jobs, every dollar she'd hidden in that shoebox, thinking she was building something for her baby. Marcus had shown her fake statements, told her they had money saved. But he'd been forging her signature, draining accounts, taking cash advances. There were also photos. Marcus with other women at bars, cheap hotels, some dated during her pregnancy. Dating profiles on 3 different apps, all listing him as single, no kids mentioned. "I want to press charges," Sarah said, her voice harder than she'd ever heard it. Vincent nodded. "We will. And I promise you, Marcus Thompson will learn what it means to cross the Castellano family. The legal system will handle some of it. We'll handle the rest." The way he said that last part made Sarah shiver, not from fear, but from something else, something that felt like power. While Sarah tried to sleep that first night in the estate, Marcus sat alone in his dark duplex, surrounded by empty beer cans and the wreckage of his entire life. The videos had gone nuclear. His phone had melted down, his mother sobbing on voicemail, his father refusing to answer his calls, his brother texting, "You're done," his boys ghosting him completely. Everyone had seen those videos. Marcus throwing a pregnant woman into the rain. A man with that symbol on his ring calling him out. Comments already spinning conspiracy theories. "That's the Illuminati, bro. Those symbols mean something. This man is done." Monday morning, Marcus tried to go to work, but his manager Carl was waiting in the parking lot with 2 corporate security guards. "Don't even clock in," Carl said, not making eye contact. Corporate called. "Those videos went viral. Company can't be associated with someone who abuses pregnant women. You're done." Marcus tried to argue, but Carl cut him off with something worse. "Also, Marcus, HR pulled your file. You were written up 3 times for harassment." Inappropriate comments to the cashier, Jennifer. "They were building a case to fire you anyway. This just made it faster." So that lie exploded too. Marcus had been on thin ice for months, had been 1 complaint away from termination. And now everyone knew. The money he'd stolen from Sarah's accounts was gone. Blown on a car he couldn't afford, bar tabs trying to impress women who didn't care, and a sports betting addiction that had spiraled completely out of control. His landlord called Tuesday afternoon. "Marcus, I need you out. You're 3 months behind on rent, and I got people calling asking if I know I'm renting to that Illuminati guy. You got 2 weeks. After that, I'm filing eviction." Marcus sat in the dark Tuesday night and faced the truth. No job, no money, about to be homeless, facing criminal charges. And worst of all, absolutely worst of all, he'd crossed people who had symbols on their rings and surveillance teams and resources he couldn't even imagine. He'd called Sarah nothing, but he was the one who had nothing left. And the people who had everything were watching him with eyes that never blinked. 3 weeks later, Sarah sat in attorney David Martinez's office, a sleek space on the 40th floor of the Renaissance Center with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Detroit River. 8 months pregnant now, preparing for the civil trial that would determine everything. "Marcus's public defender is going to try to paint you as a gold digger who trapped him," David explained. He was a brilliant attorney in his late 40s with steel gray hair and the calm confidence of someone who'd never lost a case that mattered. "He'll say you seduced Marcus, got pregnant intentionally, only remembered your wealthy family when you saw opportunity." Sarah shook her head. "I didn't even know I was pregnant when I ran from Uncle Vincent 5 years ago." "I have clinic records proving that," David smiled. "We have everything. Medical records, timeline, witness statements. His attorney will still try because it's literally all he has. What you need to do is stay calm, tell the truth, and don't let him rattle you. We have something else too." He pulled out a folder and opened it. Sarah's breath caught. Surveillance reports, financial records, background checks going back a decade, information about Marcus that even Marcus probably didn't remember, juvenile arrests, restraining orders from ex-girlfriends, a pattern of behavior spanning years. "Your uncle's organization is?" "Thorough," David said carefully. "They provided documentation that most private investigators couldn't access in a lifetime. I don't ask questions about how they got it, I just use it." The night before trial, the entire family gathered for dinner at the estate. Vincent, his wife Catherine, who'd flown back from London, their daughter Isabella, who'd driven home from Yale, aunts and uncles and cousins Sarah was still learning to know, and her grandmother Elena Castellano, 91 years old, who'd cried for an hour when she finally met the granddaughter she thought was lost forever. "You look exactly like your mother," Elena said, holding Sarah's hand with fingers that felt like paper but gripped with surprising strength. "She would be so proud of what you're becoming, what you've always been, even when you didn't know it." That night, Sarah made a decision. When this was over, she'd use her inheritance to help other women trapped like she'd been. But more than that, she'd learn. She'd study the symbols, the organization, the knowledge her mother had been mastering. She'd take her birthright and use it for something good. The Wayne County Courthouse was packed when Sarah arrived with her family. Cameras and reporters shouting questions as David led them through the crowd, Vincent's security forming a protective barrier. Inside the courtroom, Sarah saw Marcus for the first time in 3 weeks. He looked destroyed, 20 pounds thinner, unshaven, wearing a suit that hung off him like a scarecrow. His overworked public defender looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. When Marcus's eyes met Sarah's, something flickered across his face. Terror, mostly. Pure terror. Because he knew what he'd done, who he'd crossed. Judge Carol Henderson entered. A black woman in her 60s with silver locks and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Her presence commanded instant silence. David's opening statement was surgical and devastating, laying out the timeline of Marcus's systematic abuse, the financial fraud, the isolation tactics. The public defender's opening was weak, arguing that marriages are complicated, that Marcus believed he had rights to marital funds, that this was all just a misunderstanding. Judge Henderson's expression made it crystal clear what she thought of that garbage. Mrs. Here, Chen testified first, describing years of hearing Marcus scream at Sarah, watching him control her every movement. That man threw her into the rain while she was 7 months pregnant, Mrs. Chen said firmly, staring directly at Marcus. I know abuse. That was abuse. Financial experts walked the jury through the fraud, forged signatures, drained accounts, credit cards opened fraudulently. Marcus had stolen $38,000 over 18 months, including charges at jewelry stores for other women while Sarah was pregnant. Then came Sarah's turn. David walked her through the 5 years gently but thoroughly. The isolation. The verbal abuse. The control, Marcus monitoring her phone, telling her what to wear, who she could talk to. When did you learn about the financial theft? David asked. The night my uncle found me, Sarah said, her voice steady despite tears. His security team discovered everything Marcus had done. Her throat tightened. I felt stupid, used, like my entire marriage was built on lies. David let that hang in the air before asking about the night Marcus threw her out. Sarah described the burnt roast, Marcus's whiskey-fueled rage, being thrown into the rain while pregnant. He said I was nothing, Sarah finished, tears streaming now. That I'd always be nothing, that I came from nothing and would die as nothing. It made me believe him, made me think maybe I really was worthless. David's voice was gentle. But you're not nothing, are you, Sarah? Sarah lifted her head, meeting the jury's eyes. No, I'm not. The public defender tried to shake her on cross-examination, suggesting she'd manipulated Marcus, that she'd hidden her family to seem vulnerable. Why didn't you tell your husband about your uncle? He demanded. Sarah's answer was simple and devastating. Because I was ashamed. I ran from my family 5 years before I even met Marcus. I convinced myself I wasn't worthy of them. It had nothing to do with Marcus. He was just someone I met at a restaurant who seemed normal. Diana Chen, Vincent's head of security and former CIA analyst, destroyed what remained of Marcus's defense with cold, hard evidence. She walked the court through 5 years of searching for Sarah, the surveillance operation they'd mounted 7 months ago, and what they'd documented. Mr. Thompson was terminated from his employment due to multiple harassment complaints, Diana testified, pulling up documentation on courtroom screens. But he continued leaving the house daily, letting his wife believe he was working. We documented systematic financial fraud, $38,000 stolen over 18 months. We also documented Mr. Thompson maintaining active profiles on 3 dating applications, all listing him as single with no children. Some messages were sent while his wife was pregnant. The public defender tried to argue the surveillance was illegal, but Diana was ready. All observation was conducted from property owned by cooperating neighbors or from public spaces. Everything we recorded was completely legal. David played the footage. Multiple angles showing Marcus throwing Sarah's belongings into the rain. Audio of him screaming, "You're nothing!" Images of Sarah collapsed in the mud while pregnant. Multiple jurors looked away, faces twisted with disgust. Judge Henderson's expression went to stone. The trial lasted 5 days. By the end, Marcus had no defense left. His friends tried testifying he was a good guy who'd made mistakes, but David destroyed each one with evidence of lies and cover-ups. David's closing argument was powerful. This case isn't about money, it's about power and control. It's about a man who saw a vulnerable woman and decided to exploit her completely. Marcus Thompson didn't love Sarah Mitchell, he used her. He isolated her, abused her, stole from her, then tried to throw her away like trash when she'd served her purpose. But Sarah Mitchell is not trash. She's not nothing. She's a survivor. She's strong, and she deserves justice. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes. When they returned, the forewoman's voice was clear and certain. In the matter of Mitchell versus Thompson, we find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. We award full restitution of $38,000 plus interest. Additionally, we award $300,000 in punitive damages for emotional distress and fraud. We recommend criminal prosecution to the fullest extent. Marcus's head dropped into his hands. Vincent squeezed Sarah's hand, his ring catching courtroom light, that pyramid symbol gleaming. Judge Henderson looked at Marcus with barely disguised contempt. "Mr. Thompson, I've been a judge for 32 years. I have rarely seen someone systematically destroy another person so completely. You are ordered to pay the judgment within 90 days. I'm also issuing a permanent restraining order. You are not to contact Mrs. Bareilles Mitchell directly or indirectly, and you are not to come within 1,000 feet of her or her residence." When Marcus's attorney tried mentioning parental rights, Judge Henderson shut it down instantly. Given the evidence presented and pending criminal proceedings, Marcus Thompson's parental rights are terminated. He will not be listed on the birth certificate. He will have no custody, no visitation, no contact whatsoever. 7 days after the trial, Sarah went into labor at 3 in the morning. Vincent was there immediately. He'd insisted on staying in the estate's east wing for the past 2 weeks. The drive to Henry Ford Hospital was calm despite contractions, Vincent holding her hand the entire way. "You're going to be incredible," he said, "just like your mother was." Catherine stayed through all 14 hours of labor, coaching Sarah while Vincent paced outside with Isabella and other family members who'd rushed to the hospital. At 5:53 that evening, Sarah's daughter was born. 7 pounds 4 ounces. Perfect in every possible way. "What will you name her?" the nurse asked, smiling. Sarah looked at the tiny perfect face that looked nothing like Marcus and everything like hope and possibility. "Catherine," she said. "Catherine Elena Mitchell, after her grandmother's." Vincent cried when he held his grandniece for the first time, tears falling on the hospital blanket. "She has your mother's eyes," he whispered. "Exactly." The hospital room filled with family over the next hours. Mrs. Chen showed up with a hand-knitted blanket, pink and soft and smelling like lavender. "Every baby needs something made with love," she said. That night, after everyone had left and baby Catherine was sleeping peacefully, Sarah checked her phone. One last message had gotten through before she'd blocked everything. From Marcus, just 3 words: "I'm so sorry." 3 words that came 5 years and $300,000 too late. Sarah deleted it without responding. Some apologies don't deserve acceptance. Some bridges need to stay burned. 9 months later, the Castellano Foundation for Survivors opened in Detroit's Corktown neighborhood, not far from where Sarah had grown up in foster care. The building housed a shelter, legal clinic, counseling services, job training, everything a woman needed to escape abuse and rebuild. Sarah stood at the ribbon cutting with baby Catherine on her hip, surrounded by family and supporters and news cameras. On her right hand, she wore a ring now, gold, with that pyramid symbol, her birthright, finally accepted. "I started this foundation because I know what it's like to feel powerless," she told the crowd, her voice strong and clear. "To believe you're nothing because someone spent years telling you that. But I also learned the truth, that we're all connected to something larger. That real power isn't about control or abuse, it's about lifting others up. Every woman who comes through these doors will get support, legal help, financial resources, safety, counseling, job training. Whatever it takes to help them see they're not nothing, they're everything." The applause was thunderous. Sarah saw herself on monitors looking confident and powerful, nothing like the broken woman kneeling in mud 9 months ago. After the ceremony, Vincent pulled her aside. "The council wants to meet you," he said quietly. "The 12. They want to see if you're ready to learn what your mother knew." Sarah looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms, then at the foundation she'd built, then at her uncle whose organization had resources beyond imagination. "I'm ready," she said. That evening, in the estate's private library, Vincent showed Sarah things that made her head spin, books of symbols and their meanings, mathematical formulas that supposedly unlocked universal truths. Names and photographs of people who belonged to the organization, people she recognized from news, from history books, from positions of power around the world. "We don't control everything," Vincent said again, "but we influence, we preserve knowledge. We guide humanity toward enlightenment, slowly, carefully, because too much truth, too fast, destroys societies." He showed her a particular symbol, that pyramid with the eye. "It's not about conspiracy, it's about understanding that everything is connected, that patterns repeat, that those who understand the patterns can shape the future." Sarah studied the symbols, her mind racing. Her mother had understood this, had been part of this, and now it was her turn. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Marcus Thompson sentenced to 5 years for fraud and identity theft. She read about the guilty plea, the restitution ordered, the mugshot showing a broken man who looked nothing like the person who'd thrown her into the rain. Sarah felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger. Just nothing. He was her past, a closed chapter. Her future was sleeping in a crib upstairs, surrounded by symbols she was beginning to understand. 1 year after that night in the rain, Sarah sat in her office at the foundation reviewing quarterly reports. Baby Catherine toddled around, almost walking, babbling in sounds that would soon be words. "We helped 132 women last quarter," Sarah told Vincent during their weekly meeting. 18 have found jobs and housing. 43 are in legal proceedings to leave their abusers. All of them are safe." Vincent smiled with pride. "You're doing remarkable work." Sarah shook her head. "We're doing it. None of this exists without the family's support." Vincent's response was simple and true. "It exists because of you. We provided resources. You provided vision. That's what makes you one of us." He pulled out a folder. "The council has decided. They want you to attend the next gathering. 3 months from now, you'll meet the 12. You'll begin your real education." Sarah looked at the folder, saw symbols she was starting to recognize, names of people whose power stretched across continents. "I got another letter from him," Sarah said quietly. "From prison. Marcus. Saying he's changed, he's sorry. He wants to know his daughter." Vincent waited for her decision. Sarah had thought carefully about this. "Nothing. He made his choices. I made mine. Maybe when Catherine's older, if she asks about her biological father, I'll tell her the truth. But I won't force a relationship he didn't earn." She looked at Vincent, the man who'd knelt in mud for her, who'd given her back her family, who'd shown her what real power looked like. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "Why did you keep looking for me? 5 years is a long time." Vincent's smile was warm and certain. "Because family doesn't give up. Your mother died believing you'd be protected, guided, loved. When I found out you'd been lost in the system, I made a promise to her memory that I'd find you. The family keeps its promises, Sarah. Always." That night, Sarah tucked Catherine into bed and read her favorite story about a princess who saved herself. "You don't need anyone to rescue you," Sarah told her sleeping daughter. "You just need to know you're connected to something bigger. And you are. You always will be." Outside, rain began to fall. Soft Detroit rain that smelled like wet concrete and possibility. But Sarah wasn't scared of rain anymore. Rain had brought her uncle to her. Rain had washed away her old life. Rain had given her a chance to discover who she really was. She stood at the window with the baby monitor in hand and watched the storm. The drops hit glass in patterns that almost seemed purposeful, like symbols she was learning to read. Marcus had called her nothing. But nothing couldn't build a foundation helping hundreds of women. Nothing couldn't love this fiercely or fight this hard or transform pain into purpose. Nothing couldn't wear a ring with symbols that represented centuries of hidden knowledge and power. She was everything. She'd always been everything. She just needed a Maybach in the rain and a man with a pyramid on his ring to remind her. The foundation would help thousands of women over the years. Some would arrive broken like Sarah had been, convinced they deserved abuse, believing the lies. But they'd leave knowing truth, that their worth wasn't determined by how others treated them, that they had value simply because they existed, that they deserved safety and love and respect. And Sarah? She'd continue learning the symbols, studying the patterns, understanding the knowledge her mother had died protecting. She'd take her seat at tables where decisions were made that shaped the world in ways most people would never see or understand. Marcus learned the hard way that you never know who someone really is or who stands behind them in the shadows. Sarah wasn't nothing. She was everything, connected to an organization that had guided humanity for centuries. And they were watching. They were always watching. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by how others treat them. Subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption. And remember, karma doesn't forget, and neither does a family with symbols on their rings and eyes everywhere. Drop a comment telling us, what would you have said to Marcus when he realized who Sarah really was?